On tonight's summary of the Israel-Hamas War, Day 287. The Israeli delegation does not travel to Qatar despite agreement with the United States. Hostage negotiations appear to be de facto frozen. Increasing reports of the possible death of Al-Qassam's leader Mohammed Def. The commander of Hamas's Gaza City battalion is signaled as his possible successor. The United Kingdom restores its funding to UNRWA, stating that the organization has taken steps to ensure its neutrality. The Houthis launch a suicide drone from Yemen, penetrating Israeli airspace and detonating in the heart of Tel Aviv. One Israeli civilian is killed. The International Court of Justice publishes its opinion ruling on Israel's actions in the Palestinian territories, calling upon Israel to dismantle all settlements and withdraw from the territories. The court advises the UN Security Council to begin taking action to ensure Israel complies with this opinion. Hello everyone. I'm Alon Burstein, visiting assistant professor in the Department of Political Science and Israel Institute fellow at the University of California, Irvine, here bringing you the latest highlights from the Israel-Hamas War. It's currently the evening of July 19th, 2024 in the United States, the morning of July 20th, 2024 in the Middle East. Starting with the hostage situation, despite no official suspension of the ongoing negotiations, the high-level meetings that were scheduled to take place during the past week did not, in fact, take place. While initially, following the assassination attempt of Mohammed Def, different Hamas members announced that the movement was suspending all negotiations, this was later denied by the movement and negotiations were set to resume. In turn, on July 18th, it was reported that the Israeli government did not authorize the Israeli delegation that was going to be headed by the head of the Mossad, Dedi Barnea, to travel to participate in the negotiations in Qatar. Moreover, Politico later reported that this was done despite promises made by Israel to the United States that the delegation would participate in another high-level round of negotiations. According to reports, the U.S. teams were not informed about Israel's cancellation and demanded answers. In other news related to the hostage negotiations, on July 18th, after visiting IDF soldiers in Rafah, the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu issued a statement saying that his visit made him even firmer in his convictions that holding on to the Philadelphia line, that is the border between Gaza and Egypt, and onto the Rafah crossing are essential for Israel's future. He added that the military pressure alongside Israel's demands are actually advancing the hostage deal rather than forestalling it. In other words, he is saying that while theoretically the ongoing negotiations include Israel withdrawing from the Philadelphia line and the Rafah crossing, he is still convinced that Israel is going to have to hold on to them no matter what. His statements came a day after leaks emerged from Israel's cabinet meetings, in which, in response to Israel's defense minister stating that if a hostage deal is not reached in the next 2 weeks, the fate of the hostages will be sealed, Prime Minister Netanyahu reportedly responded that Israel should not be pressured, but rather Hamas should be pressured to reach a deal, adding, and I quote, "The hostages are suffering, but they are not dying." His statements came under heavy condemnations in Israel. However, I'll add quite surprisingly, they were not denied by the Prime Minister's office, i.e. the Prime Minister seems to stand behind those statements. Again, this all comes alongside the fact that the Israeli delegation was not authorized to travel to Qatar. Theoretically, the hostage negotiations are ongoing. In the United States, there's even all kinds of statements being issued that they are advancing. At the same time, they appear to be frozen to some extent between the parties, between Israel and Hamas. Remains to be seen how it develops in the coming days. Moving on to the Gaza Strip, there was a barrage of rockets that were fired from the Gaza Strip targeting the Kerem Shalom area in the last several days. Regarding the fighting in the Gaza Strip, the northern parts of the Gaza Strip, there were a series of assassinations that were reported. On July 17th, the IDF reported assassinating Anas Merad, who is a commander in the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, who reportedly is in charge of the movement's Navy operations in Gaza City. In addition to that, on July 18th, the IDF reported carrying out attacks in the Al-Shati refugee camps, targeting, among others, Muhammad Abu Hatab, who's a platoon commander of Hamas's Al-Shati battalion. I will say also that it's important to note that Hamas has been trying to rebuild its northern battalions, and the IDF is trying to curtail this activity. That likely is what stands behind these recent attempts to actually stop both the Palestinian Islamic Jihad and Hamas from rebuilding its platoons in the north. According to reports, Abu Hatab was a sniper within Hamas's Al-Shati battalions, and also was responsible for killing several IDF soldiers during the war thus far. In addition to these, on July 19th, reports emerged of an airstrike that occurred in an UNRWA school or compound in the areas of Gaza City. Hours later, the IDF reported that Adel Hamida, who's the head of military intelligence for Hamas's Gaza City battalion, was assassinated in that compound. According to reports, Hamida was taking refuge in this compound, and the IDF also added that his role included both intelligence with regards to the ongoing fighting in the Gaza Strip, as well as gathering intelligence for Hamas to carry out ongoing raids within Israel. In the central parts of the Gaza Strip, on July 18th, Palestinian sources reported an attack that was carried out targeting a car in the Deir el-Balah area. According to reports, 3 people were killed. Later reports also stated that those who were killed were known Palestinian civilians who were engaged in money exchanging. The IDF did not put out any statement, however. In the past, the IDF has targeted a lot of different money exchangers in the Gaza Strip, citing that they are part of Hamas's money laundering operations, transferring monies from the international community to Hamas. Possibly this is why the IDF targeted that car. Again, the IDF did not put out any report. In the southern parts of the Gaza Strip, on July 17th, there was substantial fighting that was reported in and around the areas of Rafah, including along the humanitarian convoy corridors within the city. Al-Qassam brigades reportedly fired RPGs at IDF troops along the border, resulting in several injuries. On July 18th, the IDF reported that a Palestinian was seen approaching the fence separating the Gaza Strip from Israel. IDF units were jumped to the scene, and it was later reported that the Palestinian was killed in an airstrike after he attempted to retreat back into Gaza. Other news related to the Gaza Strip. Speaking at a press conference on July 19th, the IDF spokesperson Daniel Hagari stated that there are increasing indications that Mohammed Def, the leader of Hamas's Al-Qassam brigades, was in fact assassinated at the beginning of the week. He stated, among others, that Def was sitting next to Rafa Salameh, the commander of Hamas's Han Yunis division, and that Salameh's death has been confirmed. In other words, this was a meeting that was between Def and Salameh. In that airstrike, Salameh was killed. According to the latest intelligence, Def was sitting right next to Salameh. Hagari added that Hamas is hiding Def's fate, however, that the IDF intends on exposing it. Prior to this, it was also reported on July 17th that there are rumors that are emerging that Hamas has signaled the division commander of the Gaza City Battalion as Def's possible successor if in fact he was killed. I remind everyone also there were reports that Hamas is securing the Deir el-Balah hospital and making sure that no one knows which bodies are being brought to the hospital. It was also rumored this might be because Hamas is trying to hide the fact that Def's body might be there. Again, we may find out more about this in the coming days. However, Def's entire life is shrouded in mystery. It is possible we actually will not find out about this and that his fate will remain a mystery for at least the foreseeable future. Remains to be seen. Regarding casualties, no IDF soldiers reported killed in the Gaza Strip since my last report 3 days ago, leaving the total number of IDF soldiers killed in the Gaza Strip since the invasion began on 326. 2,134 IDF soldiers are reported injured in the Gaza Strip since the invasion began. In turn, the Palestinian Health Ministry in the Gaza Strip is reporting that 405 Palestinians were killed in the Gaza Strip, and I say also this report came out as of July 18th. There was no report given for July 19th before recording this. It is very possible this high number includes still casualties of Palestinians as a result of Def's assassination. As a result, the total number of Palestinians killed in the Gaza Strip since the war began is reported at 38,848, and 89,459 Palestinians were reported injured in the Gaza Strip since the war began. Moving on to some reports regarding the humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip, on July 19th, the United Kingdom announced that it is resuming its UNRWA funding, which has been suspended since the charges were raised against UNRWA that some of its employees participated in the October 7th attack several months ago. The UK's Foreign Minister David Lammy, who visited the region last week, announced that the UK will be releasing 21 million British pounds that have been suspended in funding to UNRWA, adding that UNRWA is the main mechanism leading the aid efforts in the Gaza Strip, and also stating, and I quote, "The UK is certain that UNRWA is taking concrete steps following the independent inquiry into the subject, and is making certain that it holds the highest standards of neutrality." Other news related to the humanitarian situation, on July 18th, there was a back and forth within the Israeli government regarding the possible establishment of a field hospital within Israel that would treat Gazan children that have been injured in the war. Israel's Defense Minister Yoav Gallant first announced that Israel is going to set up such a field hospital within Israel. In response, however, the Prime Minister Netanyahu's office put out a statement saying that Netanyahu has not authorized the establishment of a field hospital within Israel for Gazans, and that such a hospital will not be established. Following that statement, Gallant's office also announced that Israel will, instead of setting up this field hospital, transfer children that are badly injured to a third-party country for treatment. And one final report relating to the humanitarian situation. On July 19th, the World Health Organization announced that in a UNICEF analysis that was done of the sewage water in the Gaza Strip, traces of polio have been found. This sparked major concern within the international community, as fears of polio outbursts are being raised that they may hit both the refugee camps as well as the internally displaced people's camps within Gaza. Within these camps, there's very, very poor sewage and, in general, sanitation conditions, and if there is a polio outburst, it is going to be very, very severe. We already witnessed the outbursts of various different diseases that occurred around January, February in the internally displaced camps. Right now, those alarm bells are being raised by the World Health Organization. Moving on to the West Bank, on July 18th, there was a Palestinian attack that occurred in the northern parts of the West Bank near the Hermesh settlement. Reportedly, a car bomb exploded, injuring 3 people. No arrests were made as of now, and the IDF reported that it is trying to hunt down the perpetrators. On July 19th, riots broke out in the Hawara village in the West Bank. According to reports, a crowd of nearly 100 Israeli settlers stormed the village from the nearby Yitzhar settlement after reports that a Palestinian pizza shop, which had been previously closed down by IDF orders after October 7th because it had put up pictures that were seen as mocking one of the kidnapped Israelis, had been reopened in the last several days. The IDF closed the roads into the village, and major forces entered the area as the riots erupted. According to reports, they developed stone throwing between both sides and settlers torching Palestinian stores and different fields and houses in the area. Later reports also emerged that at least one Palestinian was shot by one of the settlers. The IDF also reported that the soldiers opened fire into the air after being attacked by both sides, and 2 Israeli settlers were reported being arrested after they attacked IDF soldiers. In addition to this, in another incident that occurred later in that day, in the Shah Bel Butun village near Hebron, Israeli settlers also reportedly raided a Palestinian farm. Video footage emerged showing the attackers hitting the local residents with clubs. No arrests were reported in this incident. Moving on to the northern parts of Israel and southern parts of Lebanon, as in my last report, since there's ongoing rocket fire and IDF retaliations, I'm going to begin by giving a more generic list of the different rocket attacks and retaliations that occurred in the last several days, followed by a focus on some specific events. Throughout the last several days, there were rockets and missiles that were fired by Hezbollah, targeting vast areas of Israel's north, and specifically the Upper Galilee and Western Galilee. Rockets targeted the areas of Abirim, Manot, Neveziv, Alon, Abaddon, and Adamit. There were also rockets and missiles that were fired towards Arab el-Ramshe, Ya'ara, Metula, Goren, Kiryat Shmona, Eved Menachem, Zarit, Mount Meron, and the list goes on and on. Regarding IDF attacks, there were IDF attacks reported nearly every day, targeting Hezbollah infrastructure, military structures, lookout outposts, as well as other Hezbollah targets in a vast array of areas in southern Lebanon. These include attacks that occurred in the areas of Ita Sha'ab, Bleida, Hula. There was also artillery fire that was reported in the areas of the Shaba village, Kila village, Ramia, Adaharia. Attacks were also reported in Yarin, Hamam, Misel Jabel, Einatina, and again, the list goes on. With regards to some specific events that occurred in the last several days, on July 18th, there were several noteworthy assassinations that took place in Lebanon. These include, among others, Ali Jafer Ma'atouk, who is a unit commander in Hezbollah's Radwan Forces Operations Unit. According to reports, he was assassinated when the IDF carried out an attack against a Radwan Force headquarters. The Radwan Force, I will say, is Hezbollah's special commando units. Hezbollah later confirmed Ma'atouk's death, also saying that another person, Muhammad Hassan Mustafa, was also killed throughout the day in different IDF attacks. Al-Ahbar reported that another IDF attack that took place reportedly against the Radwan force in the Majd al-Salam region, 7 people were injured, and in a separate attack in the Safed al-Baria area, 5 Lebanese people were killed. In addition, on July 18th, the IDF reported assassinating Hassan Ali Mahana, who was reportedly a prominent figure within Hezbollah's engineering units. And in addition to that, the IDF also reported assassinating Muhammad Jabara, who is a prominent figure in Hamas's Lebanon activities. All this occurred on July 18th. On July 19th, Hezbollah claimed responsibility for 16 border incidents. This is when Hezbollah usually carries out shooting attacks against different IDF outposts in the region, including most recently opening fire at the Yiftach outpost along the border and carrying out fire towards the areas of Hardov. In addition, Hezbollah also stated that it launched drones towards Ayelet HaShachar region. The IDF reported that barrages on July 19th included over 65 rockets and missiles that were launched throughout the day. Responding to these various barrages, the IDF reported carrying out major airstrikes in the areas of Tir Kherfa and Bleida on July 19th, reportedly targeting weapons warehouses. Many secondary explosions were seen in the area. The IDF stated this shows the level of weaponry that was stored in those warehouses. Moving on to some of the regional developments, the biggest news is coming out from July 18th, when a suicide drone launched by the Houthis managed to penetrate Israeli airspace and detonated in the heart of Tel Aviv. The drone is estimated to have had a trajectory traveling from Yemen through the Red Sea and the Sinai Peninsula before penetrating Israeli airspace from the Mediterranean. One Israeli civilian was killed in this attack and 9 more were injured. The Houthis claimed responsibility for the attack, stating that Iran was unaware of the launch and was only informed after the fact. Houthi spokesperson Yahya Saria stated, and I quote, "A military attack was carried out against occupied Jaffa, what the Israelis call Tel Aviv." He added that the attack was done with a new Yemeni-developed drone, codenamed Jaffa, that can overcome air defenses of the enemy, i.e. of both Israel and of the United States. In Israel, the initial reports immediately after the attack, which occurred around 3:12 in the morning, were that the military was unaware of any suspicious activity and was investigating the source of the explosion. These reports were later updated, with the IDF officially stating that the drone was being tracked and monitored by the Israeli Air Force. However, human error led to the drone not being intercepted. The Pentagon announced several hours later that the U.S. forces also intercepted 3 more Houthi drones and a ballistic missile that was fired in that same incident. However, again, that one drone managed to escape the radar of the United States and seemingly also Israel. Both the IDF and U.S. sources have estimated that despite the Houthi claims, the drone appears to be an upgraded Simad-3 type drone, which is of Iranian origins. The IDF also reported that since the war began, over 200 cruise missiles and drones have been fired by the Houthis towards Israel, the vast majority of them being intercepted by both U.S. forces and the Israeli Air Force. Again, the big news from this is that this is the first time that the Houthis have managed to not only penetrate Israeli airspace, but actually cause Israeli casualties in the war, which indicates a bit of a different level and possibly game changer with the level that the Houthis can threaten Israel when it comes to different escalations that occur as the war develops. Some political news from the last several days. On July 19, the International Court of Justice, the ICJ, published its advisory opinion on, quote, the legal consequences arising from the policies and practices of Israel in the occupied Palestinian territories, including East Jerusalem. This relates to a case that was initiated by the UN at the request of the Palestinian Authority back in 2022, in which the ICJ was asked to review Israel's actions in the Palestinian territories and examine their legality. The court's position is therefore not a binding ruling. It was just asked to give opinion. However, it bears significant international weight. In its 83-page opinion piece that was published today, the court issues an extremely damning report with regards to Israel. Among others, in Article 230, the ruling states that, quote, the Israeli settlement policy, its acts of annexation, and its related discriminatory legislation and measures are in breach of international law. The court also reviews the various different facets of the right of self-determination and finds that Israel has taken measures to create irreversible steps in order to deny the Palestinians such a right to self-determination, including in the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and in the Gaza Strip. Concluding its ruling, the court issues several opinion pieces, including, and these are all quotes, the state of Israel's continued presence in the occupied Palestinian territory is unlawful. The state of Israel is under an obligation to bring an end to its unlawful presence in the occupied Palestinian territory as rapidly as possible. The state of Israel is under an obligation to cease immediately all new settlement activities and to evacuate all settlers from the occupied Palestinian territory. The state of Israel has the obligation to make reparations for the damage caused to all natural and legal persons concerned in the occupied Palestinian territory. In addition, the court also states, all states are under obligation not to recognize as legal the situation arising from the unlawful presence of the State of Israel in the occupied Palestinian territory, and not to render aid or assistance in maintaining the situation created by the continued presence of the State of Israel in the occupied Palestinian territory. International organizations, including the United Nations, are under an obligation not to recognize as legal the situation arising from the unlawful presence of the State of Israel in the occupied Palestinian territory. And finally, the United Nations, and especially the General Assembly, which requested this opinion, and the Security Council, should consider the precise modalities and further action required to bring an end as rapidly as possible to the unlawful presence of the State of Israel in the occupied Palestinian territory. Again, it's important to understand several things about this ruling. One, the decision itself is not binding, i.e. Israel's lack of adhering to it cannot be submitted as a grievance to the UN Security Council. At the same time, however, the court's opinion forms a basis for motions both within the UN General Assembly as well as within the Security Council, which will make Israel inherently dependent on the United States veto power, because from now on, Israel is going to be in constant defense because the official court of the United Nations has ruled all of these things. And this bears, while it doesn't have binding legal authority, it does have legal authority with regards to what is the legal status of the occupied Palestinian territories. Responding to the court's ruling, the Palestinian Authority issued statements celebrating victory. PA Chairman Mahmoud Abbas stated that this is a victory for justice and called upon the international community to, quote, compel Israel as the occupying force to end the occupation immediately and without any preconditions. The Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, in turn, put out a statement saying, and I quote, "The Jewish people are not occupiers in our land, nor in our eternal capital Jerusalem, and not in our ancestral home Judea and Samaria," that is the Hebrew name for the West Bank. He added that the court's ruling is a false distortion of history. Other elements within the Israeli government, including Finance Minister Smotrich and National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir, called upon the Israeli government to embrace full annexation of the West Bank in response to the court's ruling. Moving on to the future of the Gaza Strip, on July 18th, the Israeli Knesset, that is the parliament, voted on a principled matter, i.e. making a position statement that is not actually a legislative power, but rather a position statement of the country, declaring, and I quote, "The Israeli Knesset categorically rejects the establishment of a Palestinian state west of the Jordan River. Establishing a Palestinian state in the heart of the land of Israel will constitute an existential threat to the state of Israel and its citizens, will perpetuate the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and will undermine regional stability. The decision also adds that it is only a matter of time before Hamas will take over such a Palestinian state and turn it into a base for radical Islam, and that establishing such a state after October 7th will be a prize for terrorism and encourage radical Islam to take over the entire Middle East." The decision was also supported by Knesset members from the coalition and from the opposition. Again, this is not a binding piece of legislation, however, it is a declarative statement with regards to Israel's position. Meanwhile, leading up to the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu's visit in the United States next week, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken stated on July 19th that in conversations that will be held in D.C., the administration aims at pressuring Netanyahu to, quote, ensure that Gaza has a day-after plan that includes governance, humanitarian aid, and security. Blinken also stated in that statement that the two-state solution is not yet dead. And one final report regarding the future of the Gaza Strip, in what may be indicating a significant development, on July 19th, the United Arab Emirates became the first country to openly discuss sending forces to the Gaza Strip as part of a day-after plan to stabilize the region. The Financial Times reported that the UAE would contribute forces to a multinational operation. However, the UAE said that it would do so if the United States would take a leadership role in this operation, and also if the U.S. would support the steps towards recognizing a Palestinian state. The delegate to the United Nations of the United Arab Emirates, Rana Nusaybeh, confirmed that there are ongoing discussions between the Emirates and the U.S. about this. However, she added that the UAE would only participate in such an endeavor if it was invited by the Palestinian Authority. Why I'm saying this is a big deal is because this is the first time that any Arab state is saying that it would possibly participate in this vision that is somewhat joint by Israel and the United States with regards to a future multinational force that will take control of the Gaza Strip. However, at the same time, the UAE is making clear that it is only going to do so if it is invited by the Palestinian Authority, i.e. it is not going to do so as part of being seen as a foreign invader. However, the Palestinian Authority were reinstated into the Gaza Strip. It could then invite international forces to come in to help stabilize the region. Remains to be seen how this actually will develop and what impact it will have on possibly other countries making such declarations. However, the big deal is that this is the first time that any Middle Eastern country is saying it is willing to participate in such an endeavor under whatever conditions. However, it is willing to consider it, and that the negotiations are ongoing. If you find these reports informative, please do remember to hit that like button, subscribe, turn on notifications if you want to know when reports come out. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. Those are my highlights from the last several days. Thanks for watching.